Welcome, welcome, welcome here. This is our MedVans webinar tonight. So, but just before we come to our topic, let me introduce you. What is MedVans? What are we talking about? Our topic tonight is about the AMNOG impacts on European countries. And that's a topic about market access. And actually, that's also the roots of MedVans. What is MedVans? MedVans is a European economic group founded by the fourth market access agency. So, we at Mars, we are the market access and pricing strategy. So it's pretty clear what we are going to do. And people, our clients actually are going to ask us, hey, do you know someone from Italy? Can I help us with market access? Do you know someone from Spain? So actually, that was the idea. And also the roots of MedVans, that we actually were cooperating here with Nextep here from France, and Intexo from Italy, and Oblique from Spain, to organize here the market access also on a European level. And then that was actually the idea then MedVans was born. That four agencies founded together MedVans to cover here the European market access. And of course, someone is missing, because the guys who left us, who are actually not the European Economic Group, because you're not in the European Union anymore. But we are really happy that they are with us here, and that is also Remap Consulting from the UK. So MedVans can actually cover all Europe and not only the EU. Great. So what is MedVans is doing? Well, we are doing the same as we do in our on the national level. So we do market access and public affairs with all the tasks you see here on our chart. So if you need health policy or advisory boards or market access plan, please feel free to contact us here on MedVans if you have here anything. Well, we have here now a wonderful webinar, and of course, with our webinars at Mars, we have here also the possibility for you, dear audience, to ask questions. So feel free to ask questions after the presentation and after our discussion round. We also try to build in your questions from the audience. You can either use the Zoom chat functions, as you already do, or you use the question and A functions here, the Q&A function here in Zoom for your comments. And of course, the video will be provided afterwards. So that will be published on our website, which is www.medvans.eu. And that brings us actually to our next slide here, our webpage. You find out there on news, lots of information, also the video, and then also you find the video on the Mars website, the market access-pricing strategy.de website, which is linked there, and of course on our YouTube channel. But now let's come to our guest tonight. And we thought we'd do something nice for you for Christmas, which is okay, now let's do something nice here for our Christmas webinar tonight. Which is that we have, like in Germany, 10 years of AMNOG, right? And that was like a big anniversary here. And then we thought, well, it might be nice. What are actually the impacts of the German AMNOG, of the German market access law here on the other European countries? And or what did the other countries actually have an impact on the AMNOG? So our guest tonight is the founder and the CEO of Mars. 2 sentences about you, Stefan. Welcome to Germany.
Thank you, Lutz. I mean, most of you might know me, Stefan Walzer. I'm a health economist. Looking forward to a great discussion, I think, with all over the other participants.
And then we have from MedVans Italy. Really proud to have you all tonight here. We have Mariangela Prada, who is the CEO and partner of Intexo. Buonasera to Italy.
Buonasera, Lutz. Okay, my name is Mariangela Prada. I'm an economist by background with something like 20 years in designing and implementing market access strategy. Today, my role is just to provide you with some advices regarding the Italian current situation. Lutz, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you. Then we have also here our good friends from France, Vincent Cheney. Vincent is the founder and the partner of Nextep. Vincent, you're mute.
Activate, it's fine now. Well, thanks, Lutz. So good night, everybody. I'm very pleased to be part of the second Advanced webinar. So it will be a very interesting that I can share with my colleagues from Europe.
Okay, you're hard to understand, Masa. You should have to adjust a little bit the microphone. Okay, but great, you're here. Then we have also here from the UK, Paul Craddy, who's the founder and the managing director of Remap. Welcome to the UK. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening. Thank you, Lutz. Yes, my name is Paul Craddy. I'm one of the partners of Remap Consulting. We're a specialist pricing market access consultancy who help clients understand the UK market. And really looking forward to the discussion this evening.
Wonderful. And last but not least, we are going to Spain and have our good friend Max here, Max Brosa, who's the founder and CEO of Oblique, which is now Pharmalex. Well, hello to Spain, Max.
Buenas noches, Lutz. Thank you. So glad to be here. I am, as you said, the founder and I see some echo. The founder and general manager of Oblique Consulting, now a Pharmalex company, and so excited to join the discussion today and see if there's some links between the German HTA assessment and the Spanish one. Yeah.
Okay, great. Now we will have like a short presentation now of Stefan, and then we go on the discussion. Now, Stefan, AMNOG impact on European countries. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lutz. Thank you as well for everybody joining tonight. I think the real value now comes, right? I think, which is also obviously the discussion which will just follow after a very short kind of presentation from my side. So let's start very simply and very briefly, because we are just saying, was there maybe any kind of impact by the implementation of the German HTA now a bit more than 10 years ago on some of the other European countries? Let's next slide, please. So before starting with the impact, I think obviously the first question is, and might arise, what is AMNOG? I will not go through all of the details. I think that's quite clear. I think we have also had various sessions already through our Mars webinars, but also through our podcast, where you can maybe go a bit further into the details. But I think important is especially also maybe having a quick look which kind of potential, let's put it that way, benefits this kind of process might have been seen for, and which kind of those kind of items might potentially be seen as, let's say, a possibility to export, right? So I think the very first point I would raise for is, I think, the early dialogue, which I think is well standard already now since many years, I think, across different countries. But here I would rather say it was probably not so much coming from the AMNOG side. I think it was just a need, especially also, I think, seen in other countries, like I think for example, in the UK, where I think UK NICE has offered that already many years before somebody could even spell the word AMNOG correctly. So I think what is probably more interesting is, especially when you have a look on the timeline, which is one part. So you have a 12-month period, and I have just been attending this morning another GBA decision kind of meeting, and also the head of the GBA was also saying at that meeting, I think again this year, I think they have done over 300 consultations, but I think also around 140 benefit assessments, so January till December 2021, and all in time. That was, I think, the really interesting part, where I think that's maybe something to consider also in the discussion before and after. I think I have maybe that presented, and obviously very important as well at the time of launch, meaning whenever the dossier is especially being submitted to the GBA and the price is then being registered in the price database in Germany, the product is not only available to all patients and the price can be set freely, it also needs to be paid for by the statutory health insurance funds in Germany. So I think this is, I think, one of the core, I think, discussions and benefits also of the AMNOG process. I think currently it's still that free pricing is applied for 12 months. I think that with our new government, I think it's already foreseen that this might be cut to 6 months. Let's just see for that. But that's, I think, one of the important components. I think another important component is maybe, and I'm looking forward how that is maybe also being dealt with by the other countries, is the split between the benefit assessment, which is done in the first 3 months, and then the second part where we then have the price negotiation. I think important here is also the price negotiation is set to, let's say, 6 months as a maximum, which I think is also, let's say, combined probably with the availability of the product and the must pay, let's say, for the health insurance funds, that this is basically, let's say, set to 12 months. I mean, that's quite clearly as well something maybe important to consider. And important here also, if there's no agreement within the 6-month period for the price negotiation, then there might also be the additional 3 months of the arbitration board. Next slide, please, Lutz. I think arbitration board, I will not spend a lot of time, but maybe for those who are interested, I mean, I have had a really great discussion with Professor Jürgen Wasem, who was the former, or who is the former head of the arbitration board of the AMNOG, and he's, by the way, just the current head of the digital health applications in Germany, also there at the arbitration board. So just feel free to listen to that as well, available on all podcast channels. Next slide, please, Lutz. So moving that a bit further, I mean, sticking maybe a bit as well to the price negotiation. And I think one of the core components of that, and that's also defined in the, let's say, in the definition and the agreement for the price negotiation, is obviously the basket of the European reference prices. I mean, you see the different countries in there. Say it's not such a kind of big, I guess, surprise. Maybe Greece is still a bit of a surprise, but at the end of the day, I think I would call it a kind of standard basket where I think you see that as well in various other countries across Europe. But the question is obviously not only this way, so how could basically other countries impact Germany, where I think I would just rather say a lot of times it's at least at the very early beginning when the product is newly launched, probably still the other way around, that companies are launching with a potentially high price. That's obviously a question of a definition, right? What is really high, but it's rather high in comparison to some of the other countries. Whereas when you maybe have an indication expansion, then you obviously have as well the kind of potential impact from the other countries as well into the German price negotiation. But that's also probably more a question mark to my colleagues during the podium discussion in a couple of minutes. Next slide, please, Lutz. So I think if you maybe go back a couple of years, I think it was the whole kind of discussion was already obviously brought into the, I think also the research area a couple of times. I think this is just one of the articles, and I just put it in there because I was also an author of that. But I think we have also had great discussion, for example, with Fernando Antonianzas from Spain, but also with Lieven Annemans from Belgium, where we have just had a quick discussion how the German AMNOG could have potentially had an impact then to the Spanish and the Belgian price reimbursement decision. Was arbitrarily be chosen, but I think the expectation was in the year 2013 when that was published, was the first 2.5 years after AMNOG was launched, that it was more the expectation that there might be probably lower prices in Germany because of the benefit assessment and the negotiations afterwards. And also the other expectation was probably that we might see optimized clinical trial designs now over time, because there's a bigger kind of push, not only anymore from UK NICE in order to have probably an optimized clinical trial program, but also from other countries, obviously now also with Germany and let's say linked as well to France, for example. I think if that has happened, maybe another question which might go into the discussion a bit later on. Lutz, next slide, please. I mean, if that was really, let's say, confirmed, I mean, I'm a bit, let's say, skeptical. I mean, I think if you see, let's say, it's just one example again. It was not done from our side, but I think we have also done similar analysis, and it just simply shows that at least the launch prices have not confirmed, but at least the kind of expectations were that potentially prices were lower. I think it's probably not so much of a bigger surprise if you really, let's say, think it thoroughly through. Next slide, please, Lutz. Because obviously, I think at the end of the day, it's also a bit of working with expectations, right? I mean, nowadays, I think especially, I mean, it's maybe a bit easier to follow if you go on the table, but you see that also more visually, and it more or less says the same kind of thing. We had a quite, let's say, big differentiations, let's say, between the launch prices and the ultimate reimbursement prices after negotiation in the very early years. So especially the very first cases within the AMNOG process. And then it basically went into more kind of, I would say, a kind of steady state, right? I think at the end of the day, it looks that on average, the price discount expected is around 20% with a bit of variation, but ultimately it's at least something where I would say it might have been taken into account from the industry. That's more from a German, let's say, internal perspective, right? Just to show the kind of expectation, maybe also from a German side, might not be the same as potentially expected, even though I have to say politicians are arguing differently. Next slide, please, Lutz. So, I mean, when you follow that path, right, I mean, I brought in, let's say, the components of AMNOG within the process, the timing, the benefit assessment, we have the arbitration board, we have the price, let's say, price negotiation process. We might have expected potentially lower prices, but I think ultimately it's also then the question, as I said beforehand, we have a basket for Germany, but maybe even more importantly, and that's, I think, where we could maybe discuss, maybe agree, I'm not sure, that Germany has probably still a quite important impact on the other countries because of the international reference pricing system. And you see just here out of the article, which it's already as well a couple of years old, but I think we have just we're just running a similar kind of analysis, and I think it still shows that Germany is one of the core countries, part of the basket in most of the European countries. Next slide, please. So, cool question, and I think Lutz, that's, I think, giving the floor back to you and obviously to all of our discussants now. Was there any impact of AMNOG on other countries, or maybe was it at least fostering maybe some of the discussions I maybe potentially as well just brought in a couple of minutes ago?
Wonderful. Thank you, Stefan, for this wonderful presentation. Yeah, let's go to our guests tonight. And let's first go to Medvance, Italy, and we ask Mariangela. Mariangela, do you have any example what AMNOG actually is now, or is there any impact of the German AMNOG law on the Italian market access structure?
Well, I don't expect a direct impact on what is coming next in Germany, but I was very, very surprised when you mentioned that you are going to have a split between the benefit assessment and the price negotiation, because we are going exactly in the opposite direction. Because today we have initially we have a scientific evaluation provided by the CTS, the Technical Scientific Committee, and then the Pricing and Reimbursement Committee, who performs the calculation of the economic value. But probably from March on, we will have a single one commission, a single one joint commission. So it's exactly the opposite that you were saying. I'm hearing my colleagues.
Thank you. Now let's go to France. Vincent, I saw recently a big change actually in the French market access structure, right? That there was like a new way introduced. Has that something to do with AMNOG?
Yeah, it looks like it's something to do with AMNOG, because the president said it was a German strategy on the test for 21 months of early next year. So the background discussion is that France has been unable for a while to comply with European regulation regarding the duration between, let's say, the obtention of market authorization and access to the reimbursement market. Normally it should be 180 days, and let's say France is by far, let's say, beyond this delay. So many things have been tried. I can come back on this early access program, which has been kind of, let's say, relooked at recently. But more importantly, as part of the Social Security financing law, today is discussed, applied in 2022. There is a plan to experiment direct access to the reimbursement market, which will be afforded as soon as the HS opinion is notified, which is linked with what Mariangela just said. the learning of the French situation is that what is leading to a longer delay is the pricing negotiation with the CPS in France. So that's why the new idea is to say, look, let's split the negotiation from setting the price. So we'll provide much faster and more direct access. So this will be experimented for a duration of 21 months, as I said before, and by that time, let's say a report will be sent to Parliament to envision the extension of this direct access. So this would be a big change. I can delay, let's say, detail a bit later on the details of the way it works. You see that the conditions to apply it are very specific to France.
So if we're gonna summarize that, there's now, instead of like having the benefit of assessment of the HAS and then the price negotiation, and then after that, actually the drug is actually reimbursed and available for the French patients. Now it's actually after the benefit assessment, the drug is already reimbursed and available for the French patients, which is actually a significant actually win of time also for the patients. Am I correct, Versa?
Yes. Let me try to speak louder. I hope it's better for the audience. Obviously, the idea would be to have much faster access to innovation. You should know that the ASMR should be from 1 to 4, which means that product actually brings something new to the market. So that's the first point. But conversely, this will be allowed only for the first, let's say, registration and for the first indication. So, which is in itself a kind of limitation, because often companies are having a kind of lead, narrow population, high value indication, and then they expect to build on this to have, let's say, a higher price. This won't be the case with the system, which will be only granted for the first registration and for the first indication. But for sure, it is expected to bring to the French patient much faster in let's say, innovations.
Great. Now let's go to the UK. Paul, I mean, the NICE is the mother of the HTA process, right? So it's a little bit weird question, what actually the AMNOG has an impact on the NICE, or is it vice versa?
So I think you're right, in that the NICE is, and it's just gone through a new 5-year methods review as well, and it's really focused on what it can do and how it can bring its insights into it. While they do look globally at what is actually going on from different countries, in terms of direct impact in NICE, the impact of AMNOG is probably very limited, given the UK's focus is much more around the clinical and ultimately economic and cost effectiveness evidence that it brings.
Great. I think Stefan wants to say.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Paul, maybe if you could allude a bit more. I mean, we have just had the discussion obviously recently on the European joint HTA assessment, right? And I was always, let's say, saying as well, also from a German perspective, it would be maybe worthwhile if institutions would also be a bit more pragmatic, especially when it comes to the indirect comparison, and maybe looking more to UK NICE. Would that be something where you would say, from your experience in the UK, this is maybe advisable, or would you rather say it's not getting easier, it's rather getting even more complex?
I actually think that the indirect treatment comparisons can actually add a lot of value, particularly for orphan indications or rare populations where fundamentally there's a lack of evidence or a lack of patients that can actually be brought within the clinical program. So therefore, it makes, at least in my mind, a lot of sense to try and use indirect treatment comparisons to try and work out the added benefit that products are actually bringing, particularly in these areas where there's high uncertainty, because we all know that the challenges of doing clinical trials, particularly from company perspectives as well, and that in small populations or rare diseases, there aren't the comparators. And so to try and be a bit more pragmatic and use indirect comparisons to really help understand the uncertainty that is being brought by the products. So yes, is the short answer.
Thank you, Paul.
Great. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the indirect comparisons, that is really something which in the German AMNOG system is almost an orphan, right? We had companies are trying and trying, but as we know from the IQWiG, they don't like it.
Yeah,
Stefan,
I think
you can...
7 of the ITCs were accepted, I think, in the last 10 years out of, what was it, 80 or close to 100 attempts to use it, right? I mean, at least officially. I mean, if it was maybe be used at least internally in the political decision making, I think that's maybe another debate. But I would agree with Paul. I think it might add more value, and we maybe see that as well more when it comes to European level as well, where I think different perspectives might also be as well need to be taken into account.
Okay, and now let's go to have a look to Spain. Max, when we now look to Spain, are there any impacts of the German AMNOG on the Spanish pricing system, or is it just the price?
Of course, it's about price. I mean, German price is the maximum price that it's looked for when PNR negotiation now started in Spain. But I think that, I don't know if it was by chance, but just 2 years after the launch of the AMNOG procedure, there was a new procedure also set up in Spain, which was the so-called therapeutic positioning report preparation, which is a report that is issued by the Spanish Medicines Agency, which is quite separated from the Minister of Health and the pricing and reimbursement procedure. And it was, I wouldn't say that it was an HTA assessment, but was something like that. Okay, so it's about some kind of benefit assessment with positioning, place in therapy identification from the national perspective in Spain. So I don't think that both things are linked, but some influence may have happened, I think, maybe. But at the end of the day, it's about price. I mean, the influence of the AMNOG process in German price is something that may be an indirect influence to the Spanish pricing negotiations. Yeah.
Great. Now, dear audience, if you have any questions so far, some are actually popping in, feel free also to raise here your questions on the Zoom chat or on question and answers. Okay, and now I hand over to Stefan with the next question.
Yeah, I would again probably go back a bit further again on that EU HTA part, right? And maybe also bring it further into obviously the other discussions. I mean, we brought in the kind of timing issue, or I brought in the kind of timing issue, I think, where we just said maybe it's a good thing, and I think Vincent has well agreed on that there might be maybe a faster patient access, but then obviously the health systems or the insurance companies would also need to pay for it at the availability, maybe even before the price was negotiated. I was just wondering if then that kind of potential new layer from an EU HTA perspective might maybe even further delay access to patients, to be maybe provocative, at least in some of the countries. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Maybe Mariangela from Spain, because I think there I don't see those discussions like we're now seeing in France.
Well, we are in the middle of a big change in Italy. I mean, for instance, one of the most important thing we had was the early access scheme, because we had this law 648 that allowed drugs to be free for patients. We had the found AIFA 5%, and now we observed a strict reduction of authorization on in this sense. And I guess that, as I mentioned before, to create a unique commission is the chance to speed up the processes, because our data show that the drugs authorized between 2018 and 2021 needs on average 10.5 months of negotiation. Then if you consider also the bureaucratic time for the publication in the official gazette, it means that you will have these drugs 1 and more year after the European authorization, which is too much, even if they are orphan drugs and so on. So in my view, having an European centralized HTA process could be something useful for overcoming all these problems. But even because in Italy we have AIFA, which is a regulatory agency, which is a payer, which is who decide the price. So it's quite a situation strange.
Yeah, I can imagine.
How's about the situation in Spain with the delay of the product?
Well, I think the situation is quite the same in Spain than in Italy. We are getting more and more delays in effective access to patients of new drugs. But and in fact, the IPT procedure, the therapeutic positioning report procedure that I just mentioned before, that was set up in 2013, has a new procedure that was set up in last year in 2020 that included, for instance, an economic evaluation, a formal cost effectiveness evaluation. And it also included a more predictable, in theory, pathway and timelines. The true fact, after 1 year of experience of this new procedure, is that things are getting longer. And in 5 products that have been assessed by this new procedure, and the average time of just the HTA assessment, which is before the pricing and reimbursement process starts and negotiation starts, has been about 10 months, 10 to 12 months, just for the benefit assessment and the cost effectiveness information. This makes things crazy in terms of timelines. We'll see what happens in the next time. Yeah. But I think that the joint assessment in Europe may even be better from the Spanish perspective, if it's predictable in terms of timelines. Yeah.
So one advantage of the German AMNOG would be actually the strict timelines. I mean, as we remember the chart Stefan showed, right? There, the GBA, the Federal Joint Committee in Germany, receives this dossier the day at the launch. And then there's a 3-month period for the IQWiC, for the Independent Institute for Quality in the Healthcare System, to assess or to perform actually the benefit assessment, right? And after that, the report comes, it will be published on the website of the GBA, and then the GBA also performs an oral hearing, right? Then all the stakeholders have the right for a statement, and then they decide on the added benefit, and then it's done within 6 months. So is that a desirable time frame, or do you think that's just going to be too fast if you look at your countries?
If I can say it, I would love that for Spain. I mean, you know, I think the 2 main issues we have in the Spanish PNR procedure is lack of transparency and lack of predictability in terms of everything, not only the outcomes, but even the how to interact with health authorities and what are the timelines and everything like that. So if we could just follow your procedures, that would be really good for us, for sure.
Okay. So I see also agreement from Italy, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, you would love that. So, and how's about the UK? The mother of HTAs.
So unfortunately, because of certain politics, we're no longer going to be part of the European HTA, which I personally think is a bit of a loss, because I think that there are benefits, and particularly in terms of how it's moving forward, sort of similar to what NICE is doing, where now NICE is now running its processes in parallel to the regulatory procedures. I think that a European version of that, which is what is proposed, where the EU HTA runs almost in parallel with the EMA assessment, can actually speed access, in theory, to a lot of countries. I guess the proof in the pudding will come as, will it really just be an additional barrier, or will it actually enable faster access into these markets?
Okay, and how's about in France, Massa?
Well, in France, yes, normally you should expect that this should, let's say, ease the process. But when it comes to the money part, then it goes back to the countries because the budget is not a European budget. So that's why you can reach pretty has taken time with the UNITA, but now you can reach a kind of agreement like the clinical trials are the clinical trials, patients are the patients, and those are available across Europe. So you can reach an agreement regarding, let's say, the medical and scientific evaluation, and let's do it at once instead of multiplying by 5 or 27. But then, obviously, I know that France, and supported by Germany, by the way, at the same time, said, okay, that's one thing. But appraisal is one thing, but evaluation is another thing. So appraisal means that when it comes to what's the value for the French patients, then we need to discuss because we have priorities to handle from social, let's say, security, but also from the public health standpoint. Those priorities are linked to the country, and we might decide not to invest that much money in this type of product, regardless of the fact that this is a good product evaluated throughout Europe. So, and this is linked with what is happening now when we coming back to the first point of the discussion. Interestingly, in the new process is kind of, let's say, squeezing the HTA part, the HLS part, but let's say, because it's done very quickly, it's right after sorry the HLS, it's the locally, so which is kind of European evaluation done, but and you use the duration, the time, let's say, to put aside the time, which is a tricky time in terms of price negotiation locally. So it's another way to highlight the fact that, yes, we can go up to the medical and scientific evaluation altogether. And this might give an opportunity to even apply the German system regarding the direct access. But we take an appointment because a year after, because this won't go beyond a year, we'll have to finalize and to end the 100% reimbursement will be granted early on. So, and that second discussion will be strictly linked to the local country, let's say, investments in health policy.
Yeah,
and
that's
where that will be the, as far as I understand, and we know it's a limit today to have a joint overall, let's say, evaluation and appraisal.
Yeah, but we all know, as Professor Zweifel always said, right? Look at the Lisbon Treaty, right? Healthcare is something of the national governments, right? So Stefan?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think I would just want to quote again the head of the GBA, who was also just saying yesterday in the press that the added benefit and the pricing will stay within the national responsibility, right? I think that's something as well, just being reinforced by him as well, where I would agree, I think, with you, Vincent, that, let's say, the benefit assessment, maybe it's more the SMR, kind of, if you translate maybe into the French system, right, which is being done on the European level, and then the ASMR and the negotiations might still happen on a national level. So I think it probably makes sense also to have maybe a joint, I would rather say, gathering of data and evidence. I'm still skeptical if this would really be a, let's put it, a decision-making assessment on the European level, how we, for example, see it from a regulatory perspective. But I might be wrong, right? I mean, if people think back to the regulatory side 20, 25 years ago, I think nobody could really believe that there's only one institution responsible for the registration of product, right? So that's, I mean, you know, keep open, obviously, but let's see, because the money is still with the national, or let's say with the national countries. So also the perceptions, the kind of push towards the different areas might also then obviously come from the countries. But that's just my view. I don't know how the others see that.
I think Mariangela wants to join.
Yes, because we are working a lot on this in order to understand this point. I mean, we are performing now an analysis comparing the innovation rating, focusing on the therapeutic added value in Italy versus the SMR in France. And for some drugs, not a small number, we have very different evaluations. Now these are very preliminary data that we are going to deeper analyze. Nevertheless, it will be extremely interesting to look at the drivers for this so different kind of evaluation.
Yes, please, Max.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I think that finally, if we get to separate the assessment from the final appraisal and the decision in all these processes in Europe, we could all benefit from a joint benefit assessment at European level. And I'm sure that those differences that Mariangela has just mentioned are not well and really justified by the clinical evidence available. That's my thought.
Okay, that's also a comment of our dearly lovely audience. It would be nice, trust a benefit assessment done from an EU country and then negotiate at the national level the price, right? But if we look at that first half of the sentence, to be nice, trust a benefit assessment done from one EU country. Is that really working? Stefan?
I mean, you know, if you bring it up, I mean, more to a subnational level, right, to a European level, then it's basically what we'll see in the next couple of years, right? I mean, there might be then a European assessment, and then the negotiations are just being done at the national level. Let's just see how this will work, because ultimately, especially when we think about the timelines, all of the evidence needs to be ready around the time when companies are registering, right? Not even knowing their label, right? First issue, second issue, how should you really run into a comparison if we want to be pragmatic, and if they would be acceptable at that level, which I really hope, how could those as well be ready at that time? So let's see. I think we'll probably see some kind of improvements. I'm pretty much sure, where some companies might have everything in their row. But if I think about some of those smaller companies, biotechs, maybe coming over from the US with good products, but where I'm just a bit skeptical also from a resource perspective from their side, that everything is ready really at that EMA level, that it could really be used across countries, I'm again a bit skeptical.
Yes, I would tend to agree, because there is always a political component into these moves and changes. And that's the case for France. Typically, this has been announced by Macron. At the time, he's willing to make France even more attractive to the companies. This announcement has been made during a strategic council with the industry. So obviously spot on in terms of audience. Because there is a strong push from the industry syndicate in France, highlighting the length of the process overall in France, which is by far, let's say, too long. I mean, on some metrics, France is rated the 23rd out of 27 in terms of overall delays, so which is it's obviously a nice way to put pressure on the government. And Macron made the announcement, but so there is a political intent and opportunity to do it also at the time, as you know, Macron and France will be heading Europe for the coming 6 months. So we've learned to be cautious with this announcement. Will be an experiment using this direct access German way. And what would be of interest probably is to get the learning from what has been, let's say, provided by the German system after 10 years, and what is about to change. For instance, Stefan, you mentioned that they were considering to reduce from 1 year to 6 months. They said the price grant duration. So this type of learning would be of interest to anticipate the way it will be actually implemented in France after the 21 months first period. Because we don't want just to have had, let's say, nice political announcement and exciting perspective, which might end up into something very different. One example is that during the parliament discussion, there was an attempt to limit this direct access to the product we would have not been granted with the early access program, which has nothing to do. I mean, early access program is limited to a very fairly narrow let's say, type of product, while hopefully the direct access will be available to any product, let's say, having ASMR for 1 to 4. So, which is a much broader, let's say, target. But we'll see. But I think, to come back to your point, Stefan and Lutz, if we can build on the German experience, maybe we can, let's say, maximize the experiment in France.
Yes, you brought something up, which is the direct access. So, Paul, when you look at the UK, how is the UK actually dealing with access to patients? There were like discussions in the public domain in the past, right? Are there any recommendations for Europe about this?
Well, sort of also coming back to Stefan's point around, do companies have the resources for doing both submissions in parallel, both regulatory and HTA in parallel? This has actually been going on in the UK for the last sort of 3-4 years with the oncology drugs and the cancer drugs fund, where the timelines have been brought in parallel. And what we have seen is through the analysis that it's the larger companies that can actually manage this and get their house in order. But there is definitely a lot of smaller companies who are going through the regulatory and then trying to overcome the market access challenges that are put in front of it. And ultimately what it means is a slower and longer timeframes for innovative drugs trying to get access to the patients. And that's not due to any sort of challenges from NICE. The processes are there. It's purely a resource constraint from smaller companies who just don't have the resources in-house to try and deal with all the challenges that are being put in from both regulatory, but also from HTA and commercialization to get the products to the market in timely manners without unlimited funds, effectively.
Great. Now we have one question of the audience, which actually say, where is someone who describes himself as a rookie to pricing strategy. Oh, that's a nice description. But Germany is like the head of AMNOG. I mean, is the head in the AMNOG process, right? And they're setting the price label for the other European countries orientating. That's what you always hear. But on the other side, like there's this low levels of tempting distributors to export from Germany to other European countries to increase profits and hence leading to supply shortage in its home market, which is really frustrating. Is that also a point?
Yeah, I think we probably need to differentiate here, right? Which products we're speaking about, right? I think the innovative kind of products, I think that's probably more where we focused currently, the kind of discussion, innovative, benefit-driven, and newly launched products, right? I think that the point what I think the participant was probably bringing up was probably more the kind of older products where it's going more into kind of generics, or maybe even the time before, but where there's at least more competition, right? That's maybe a point to take where we might see as well different kind of quota in Germany, where we might see a selective contract tenders, etc., where this might potentially then have one or the other impact as described. But I think I would not see that as a major, let's say, component of the discussion on newly innovative products, where I think we have more the kind of higher prices.
Great. Now another point of the audience is that the countries are actually now competing very much on attracting life science, right? Especially also with the Brexit, and that brings also market access into the play. But on national, we still have these problems of like our stuck healthcare policy. I mean, if we look at all the behaviors of our national agencies, and that with this really challenging points now coming up, like older populations, more innovations also on the digital healthcare, right? Other ways of treating, and also like the national budgets, which are like, you know, shrinking and shrinking. It's getting harder and harder. Healthcare costs are rising and rising. So what's the idea here to have it like it better done in the future?
I can start if you want, Lutz.
Yes.
I think that there's a good word in that intervention from the audience, which is the coherent policy. This is something that we don't have in Spain, unfortunately. because from one side, there's a sort of initiative to bring life science companies into Spain and to promote the creation of manufacturing facilities and bring headquarters of companies and blah, blah, blah. But on the other side, the barriers to market access of new innovative drugs are getting tougher and tougher. So I don't know what's going on with that, but at least from the Spanish perspective, there's quite a nice mess right now. No current policy so far. Yeah.
So current policy first, okay. How's about in Italy?
In Italy, we have some regions who are ready to use this opportunity. Also the funds coming from Europe after the COVID situation and so on, but some others that are thousands of years behind. So even in Italy, we don't have a very strong political situation, as you perfectly know. So I guess I don't think that we are ready to properly understand how much is essential and a holistic approach to give a push to the healthcare in general.
How's about in France?
Well, for France, you've seen that Macron has been very proactive in trying to make France more attractive. His primary focus is on taxes, and this goes beyond the healthcare sector. As you know, we are the world record man, let's say, regarding the taxes, let's say, absolute amount and the relative amounts. And the cost of the work is huge in France compared to many other geographies. So that's the #1 priority the government is focusing on, and this will benefit the healthcare sector. Probably has already benefited. Otherwise, there is an intent, and this has already been highlighted, to favor those companies having facilities in France in terms of, let's say, it's not that straightforward, like the more facilities, the better the price, but at least you have a much better environment and, let's say, way to envision your file and your registration if you are going to produce in France. It can't be strictly linked, but there is a clear intent to encourage companies to have their plants on the French ground and to produce in France as much as they can. And I've experienced it myself because I was in a partnership, being in charge of an American subsidiary affiliate in France, linked with Sanofi, and it was very clear that the fact it was Sanofi helped a lot, let's say, the alliance in terms of pricing and reimbursement. So that's the way it is. There is this intent, but as industry member, we've tried for years to say, but let's make the rules very clear, transparent, and we gave up because we found that the more transparent it is, the less room for negotiation you will have in the end, and you will suffer from having a transparent system, which will, let's say, make it even harder. So there is always, it's between the lines. We are always talking about facial price only, and we know that so many things are happening behind, let's say, below the line and after the negotiations. So even when we talk about reference price, we know that this is kind of reference, but in the end, what counts is once everything has been negotiated, including the discounts and all the sophisticated systems to get back money, then you get the actual price, and those are the two known across Europe.
Okay, let's go to the UK. Paul, comprehensive current policy for healthcare. Is that still possible with the Brexit in mind?
Short answer is no. The part of a lot of what where the UK is, at least in the world, has been around taking back control and trying to distance itself from the EU. And the UK has been very much focused on trying to encourage life sciences, and lots of processes have been put into place. And what we're seeing with the MHRA now and with NICE is real partnerships in trying to make access and regulatory much more quick and tight. And a personal view is that the approval of the Pfizer vaccine as one of the first in the world was solely partly to show that the new systems work, but also partly political to get that into play. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a number of these types of initiatives coming from the UK government around being the first of new products or generations to try to highlight the UK as the place to do life science research within the, well, European and global context.
That's also like having in mind the innovative licensing and access pathway, the ILAP, right? Which is also interesting here, actually also mentioned by the audience. And there's one nice comment that says, the elephant in the room is the EMA, the EMA. So what do you think about that statement? How will EMA deal with all that?
I think, first of all, we need to see who and how will the benefit assessment at the European level being done, right? I mean, I think that's a big kind of political debate, obviously, not only the EMA, but I think we have seen that also from the various, let's say, payer authorities, ministries of health and different countries to drive and still have their influence, right? I mean, at least we have seen that in Germany, where I think all of the stakeholders were first, let's say, fighting against European HTA, but that was obviously just a kind of, let's call it maneuver, right, from a negotiations perspective, in order to at least put some strength from the German side and from this German assessment perspective, right, the scientific assessment perspective in there, but also obviously to have probably a couple of important seats for the assessments in there. So let's just see. I mean, as I would agree, I think EMA is probably one of the elephants, but I would say there are a couple of further elephants in the room. It's half of a zoo, I guess. So let's just see how this will really get into life. I mean, it will be really interesting kind of times now until this is fully set up, I would say.
Great. I think that was some nice closing words. So actually having the time in mind, coming to the end, let me go back to our final questions, which is, I mean, just on Monday, Tuesday, the European Commission decided on the joint European HTA approach. And I want to have like one sentence of you, dear guests tonight. How much AMNOG will be in there? What is your guess? Right, Stefan, you start. One sentence.
How much AMNOG will be in the European HTA? I think quite a bit, but I think especially more from the methods perspective, which is probably not so different to most of the other countries. So that is why I would not say it's purely AMNOG. It's just a good standard of evidence-based medicine.
Okay. How's about Mariangela?
Surely more than Italy.
Okay, that was one sentence. Thank you. Paul?
I fully echo Stefan. I think quite a bit, but purely from a robust evidence-based method approach.
Okay, then we go to France. Vincent?
Yes, I agree too. I won't be mentioned as AMNOG, obviously, because you know, the good ideas are not traveling that well across Europe, but for sure will be set as a standard. And I found it interesting that for once, in our case, Macron reference to the German system, which is a good signal. We start building on each other.
Okay. And then last but not least, we go to Spain. Max?
I think that in terms of quality and exhaustiveness of the benefit assessment, the German AMNOG procedure is by far the best in Europe and in the European Union right now. So I think that I hopefully expect that it will have a big influence in the joint HTA assessment. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, dear audience, that was our 1 hour webinar here, our MedVents webinar here tonight with our guests from Italy. Mariangela Prada is the CEO of Intexo, with Vincent Cheney, who's the partner of Nextep, and Max Brosa, who's the CEO of Oblique, now it's Pharmalex, and of course, Paul Craddy, who's the founder of Remap, and of course, Stefan Walzer, who's the CEO and founder of Mars. My name is Lutz Vollmer, and I was your moderator tonight. And before we're going to end, you can rewatch this webinar and also, of course, the other webinars if you go to our website, www.madvance.eu. And there you find also the link to our German website, Madvance Germany, www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de, the Mars website where you have also the other webinars and the link to the podcast. And check out the Madvance site for the latest news here in the market access and public affairs picture for your drugs. And also don't miss here our YouTube channel where you can actually submit all or rewatch all the webinars. Yeah, that's it. And of course, someone were asking here about the Market Access podcast here. That's the MAP podcast here of Stefan Walzer, who has the discussion with the former head of the arbitration board of the AMNOG arbitration board, Professor Dr. Jürgen Wasen. So he's a great guy. Lots of very detailed information how the arbitration works. So that's actually also a good work and a good lesson for the other countries. What are you going to do when negotiation fails? Yeah. And that brings us actually to the end. You can actually subscribe us on LinkedIn to get the information on the next Madvance webinar, which is for sure coming up in the next year. And of course, on the Mars webinars here, you see here, I mean, with the German impact, with the new German Ministry of Health, we have a very wonderful webinar in January with Professor Dr. Thomas Breisach. And then we go a little bit into the pricing a strategy with Renato De La Mano. Well, that's it. You can see here a picture of my hometown, Rottenburg am Neckar, which is actually brings us to the Christmas point. Madvance wishes you happy holidays, peace, healthiness, stay healthy here, and all of the Madvance wish you happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, happy Christmas, everything. Okay, that's it. That's it. Happy holidays to you all.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye.